All right, do a video, something a little different today. I've been doing some speaking engagements. I volunteered to speak at a couple places, several places, and different bee clubs, different counties, surrounding counties, and I thought I would get maybe a request or two at different times during the winter, and it seemed like everybody requested during the same week. So I've been doing a little bit of speaking here lately, giving different presentations at different club meetings, and I've had some requests for people that couldn't be there for the presentation. So I thought I'd do a video and where I could have it and then just send them a link to the video. I can send the presentations out, but it just has the basics of what was talked about. Most of the topics are elaborated on and talked about a little more. So I'm going to try this. I think I've got everything figured out and hooked up right. We'll see. I did try to record one meeting, and I think I just forgot to hit record, so that didn't work out either. So trying to get back into the swing of teaching and speaking and doing that type of stuff. This is a presentation I did for the Bullitt County Beekeepers Association. President is Dr. Leonard Davis. That club, he graciously let me speak at one of their meetings on Wednesday night of last week. So I was glad to get to do that, and this is the presentation for that. I've had a request for it, so I'm gonna go ahead and give it in again so we can put it on YouTube. The conditions of the hives right now, my hives, it's fall, going into fall. Today's October 15th, thereabouts. I always forget to check the date before I start these things. But the hives are all doing good. I've got probably I've got 22. I've combined several of my swarms that I caught, and they're all looking pretty good. I've got one hive that's got 2 full deeps full of bees with no honey, no weight to it at all. I mean, you can push on the top of it and it'll just lean backwards with no effort at all. So it's a little bit unusual because it's got a ton of bees. Should have been more than enough bees to make a fall honey crop or get something. That the fall, that's another thing. The fall flow has just been unbelievably. We had a wet summer. The grass never stopped growing. I thought, man, this fall crop's gonna be good. I won't have to feed. That's not been the case. I've not smelled dirty socks or goldenrod honey at all. Just not been any honey coming in. But the hives are mostly heavy. I was able to leave some honey on there from after we extracted. I actually extracted a little earlier, and the spring flow went later, so that's kind of helped. But I've got over in the other property, I think I've got 3 or 4 hives I'm feeding there, and then I've probably got 3 or 4 I'm feeding here. But they're all gaining. I can tell they're gaining weight and putting on weight, so they're looking good for making it through the fall. In getting back into this and getting to know beekeepers, a lot of the beekeepers nowadays and at these meetings are doing a lot of stuff that I don't do. And I never say never in beekeeping. I try to keep it to the necessities. I plan to get up. I'm very optimistic now that I caught 20 swarms this spring. Than catching more. I'm gonna put out 20 more swarm traps this spring, or the same 20 in the same spots probably. May look at some spots that didn't catch any and not put them there, but I'm gonna try to make some more. I've got all these boxes that I've put together, and I'm gonna try to make them into swarm traps and put some more out this spring and catch some more. But with those and splitting the hives that I have, and watching my mite treatment so they'll be strong enough to split come springtime, I'm hoping to get up to at least 50. I thought I would get up to 10 or 12 this year, and I got up to 20, over 25 at one time till I combined. I'm hoping to get up to between 50 and 75 this spring. So I'm in the process of, I've got all my boxes together. I've got probably 400. I've got 1,000 frames and 1,000 sheets of foundation to put together, and I've probably got 400 or 500. I don't think I'm quite halfway yet on the frames and the acorn foundation, but I'll have plenty of equipment. got some rough sawed maple that I've had. A friend of mine gave me some trees a while back, and we sawed it on my dad's sawmill. It's been sawed for probably 4 years, so it's good and dry. And I'll probably be I made one screen bottom board out of it the other day just to see if I liked it, the setup. I got the plans online and made that. I'm gonna make some migratory top covers and see how I like those. And then I'll probably make some solid bottom boards. I'm a little bit, I want to use the oxalic acid vaporizer. I got me a Laura Bees vaporizer just come in a couple days ago. I want to use it, but I don't want all my vapors going out the screen bottom, so I might make me some solids. I don't know. I could slide an insert in, I guess, and do it that way, and I think some people are, but I got to get that figured out. But the bees are, for the most part, doing good. There's a lot of bees, very little brood. I'm surprised by the fact that there's just a small little patch. Several hives just have a small patch of brood, and I'm hearing that from other beekeepers too, so I don't think that's too unusual compared to everybody else, but it surprises me a little bit that they've shut down so much. Makes me a little more optimistic about using the oxalic acid vapors because there's not much brood now, so we'll see how long that lasts or how it goes. But I still got strips, Apivar strips in now. The ones here at home, the hives that I've got with strips in them, they're due to come out. I'll take them out. Today's Sunday. I don't work on Sundays, but I'll take them out probably tomorrow if it's warm enough. And then the ones at the property went in a little bit later, so they'll come out November 15th, I think is when they're due to come out. But I'm looking forward to checking the mite counts. Wrote down the mite counts before I started and checking the mite counts after I finished to see what kind of drop, if any, there is. So it's neat. This is the first year I've used the Easy Check. We always use sticky boards, and I'll be able to check and see if it actually affected the mite counts or not and know where I'm at. I think key, whether you treat or treatment free, you at least need to know if you've got mites or not. And if you do, well, you've got mites. You just need to know how bad they are. And that Easy Check tells you that. So that's the condition of the hives. But I give this program, I think, at Bullitt County. And so if you came to that meeting, you've already heard it. But we'll do it again and go through it again here and see what we can come up with. The picture that I have is one of my hives. I checked the other day. You can see the 2 strips of Apivar that I have in there, the 2 white strips. The pictures, when you put them on here, get a little distorted when you size them, so that it's looks a little bit different, but I think you can see what's going on there. Got 2 Apivar strips in there. I use division board feeders. I really like a lot. I put a piece of wood to keep them from spreading out in the middle from the weight of the syrup. And I use 2 floater sticks. They're down in there. That feeder's empty right now. I hadn't filled it up yet in this picture. So, but it holds a gallon of syrup, and they can take as little or as much as they want to. They'll usually clean that out in a couple days. It doesn't take long for them to clean it out. And then you can kind of get an idea of how many bees are in this hive. You want good full hives with bees all the way across the top bars. So it's a good looking hive for going into winter and getting ready to go into winter. A couple of hives I've got feeders in that are maybe heavy enough. They've got some weight to them, but I'm still feeding a little. You don't want to overdo it and pack them out completely, but they can still stand to take on a little weight. Just avoiding the pitfalls of losing hives during the wintertime is what we're looking at. Everybody, go to these meetings and club meetings and bee school. I did bee school yesterday, and a lot of beekeepers, especially new ones, well, I've had hives for 1 or 2 or 3 years, and I can't keep them live during the wintertime. What do I need to do? So that's kind of what we're talking about, looking at fall management, is seeing what the biggest issues are for losing hives, and then doing something to help our bees make it through winter. We know, it's not a secret what kills our bees, and we know what it is. The top reasons for winter hive losses. We know what they are, and we know some things we can do about it. Bee Informed Partnership, they put out a survey every year. If you've been beekeeping very long, you know that you've gotten a survey, and they're very persistent. They'll send that thing time after time after time. When I first started seeing it, I thought they was wanting to tax me on my somehow tax me or get money from me or do something for tax reasons. It's really not that. You really need to fill out that survey because they take all that information and compile it, and then you can look at it. You can go back to 2018. You can look online right now under this and look top reasons for hive losses in 2018 and see what they were. I seen an online video that had a 5-year study. And I think the last year was 2018. I'm not sure. But they were pretty much the same as 2021. But this information is from the 2020, 2021 year. But it's from the last year that was taken. This is the top 5 reasons for winter hive losses. Number 1 is varroa mites. Number 2 is nutrition, which would fall in line with starvation. The reason why we've lost hives, they ask you beekeepers why you lost hives, and this is the top 5 answers that they give. They also break it down into hobby, sideline, and commercial beekeepers. So you can tell what commercial beekeeper said, hobby beekeeper said. So whatever you fall in, you can tell. 3rd reason is queens. 4th reason is kind of weird. A lot of people said, I don't know. I had hives died and I don't know why they died. And then weather was the 5th reason. So we can't do much about the unknown, and we can't do much about the weather. But we can do something about varroa, nutrition, and queens. Average hive losses I guess across the nation, according to the Beltsville, Maryland Bee Lab, we average 40% of our hives, losing 40% of our hives every year. So we know the reasons why we lose them, and we know how many we're losing on average. It's frustrating when you get into beekeeper, and I tell new beekeepers all the time, you hate to see somebody start beekeeping and then not to get frustrated and stop because they lose their hives. If you're losing hives, you're not the only one. But hopefully there's things we can do or things that we haven't looked at that we can look at that would keep that from happening. But you're not alone if you're losing hives. 40% average loss throughout the United States, according to the Beltsville, Maryland Bee Lab. With that said, it's kind of, you got to take it with a grain of salt because our hives, if we lost 40% every year, we wouldn't have any hives left. We make up those losses. Somebody said that as long as there's money to be made in beekeeping, that we'll make up those losses. We split our hives, we catch swarms, we do stuff to make up those losses, so that average colonies in the United States is actually going up because we do make up those losses to try to have more hives for the next year. So we lose bees, but we make them up through splits and other things. Number 1 reason for hive loss is varroa mites. Just throw a picture in on that page of how I keep notes. I keep notes on my hives, and I've got an app on my phone, and I'll take a picture. I don't always do as good. I keep everything that I do on top of the hive, but I don't always do as good as putting it on the app. But I can come back and take a picture of that and then catch it up on my app because it's got a spot for pictures. So each hive, that one's, I can't tell, 19, 18. Can't say what that says on there, but it's mite counts, how many frames of bees, all that stuff. Anything I do to that hive is listed on there, so I can kind of keep track of things. Just the way I do it, everybody does it different. So, but mites is the number 1 reason for losing hives. We've all got mites. You've got mites. I've got mites. It's just how many and keeping them under control. Dr. Jamie Ellis made a comment that if it were only mites, they would be a minor nuisance. If it were only viruses, which is caused by mites, but if it were only viruses, they would be a minor nuisance. But the two together, mites that eat the fat bodies of the bees and the viruses that they bring, which are numerous, is devastating to a beehive, and they won't last long without it. or they won't last long with it. If they get that stuff in the hive and you don't do anything about it, they're not going to last long. There's big controversy between treatment and treatment-free. There's a lot of treatments we can use. There's a lot of things. I was treatment-free for a long time, and I lost my hives because of it. But I understand people that are treatment-free to an extent. But I'm trying to keep people from losing hives, and if you're gonna keep your bees and not lose them, you're gonna have to treat them. But there is some things, even if you are treatment free, that you can do that's not putting chemicals in the hive. I don't understand. I listen to some podcasts on treatment free beekeepers, and I'm totally don't understand not treating or not checking for mites at all, and not even know. I'm not gonna. I don't have no reason to check for mites because I'm not gonna do anything about it. Let's just strong survive. Let's do the 007 method of beekeeping: live and let die. I just don't. I want to know if my hives are dying and they're all dying from mites. I want to know that. If I've got such strong bees, I've heard treatment-free beekeepers say all the time, well, my bees, you don't understand, my bees are so strong, I don't have mites. And my bees survive just fine. Well, if your hives do die, how do you know? I don't understand not checking for mites, because there's things you can do, various things that you can do to help your hives, even if you don't want to put chemicals in your hives. Check for mites. We use alcohol wash. We used to always use a sticky board, which required you to come back in 24 hours, and it was always difficult, or something was going on, or the weather was bad, or whatever. So it's been cool for me this year. I can go out there and check for mites and know how many mites I have when I get back to the house. So it's a lot better way of checking for mites. But a treatment-free way to help with mites, or even if you treat, is to use drone brood. You can put a drone brood frame in your hive, let the queen lay that up. Mites like drone brood a lot better than worker brood. Once that frame gets capped and it's full of drones and mites, you can take it out and dispose of it, or scrape it off if it's a plastic foundation, and put it back in the hive. But you get rid of, you lose all those drones, but you lose all those mites too. So it's a way to help your mite load without using any chemicals. I always look for a healthy colony appearance. When I look in a hive, actually that was the drone brood in this course of this checking for mites, is a way to check for mites. You can use your capping scratcher and scratch up some of your mites, pull them out, and see how many mites you've got by looking what's on the drone brood. You can see a red mite, really easy on a white drone brood. It's super white, and they're really easy to tell. Another way to check and see if you've got mites. Going back to the treatment-free method, you can use those drone brood frames, pull out the drone brood. Well, how'd that happen? There it goes. Pull out your drone brood and get rid of mites that way. Your screen bottom boards, we used to think that 70% of your mites would fall out the bottom of the hive through your screen. That's not the case. It's more like 5%. So it helps, but it's not going to take care of all your mites. There's other things that we can do to get rid of help with our mites. You don't always have to put chemicals in your hive to help with them. Brood breaks, that's the one I was trying to think of. You can take the queen out for a day or two and put her back. You can put a queen cage or a slide-in or a push-in queen cage in your hive and trap her on the frame to where she can't lay any eggs, and just to have a brood break for that hive. That breaks the cycle of the mites raising babies and will help with your mite counts as well. But there's things you can do, but why we don't check for mites. We've got a really easy way to check for them, at least in a few hives, and kind of see what they're doing. We all need to check, see what we got. Number 2 reason for hive losses is starvation/nutrition. Everybody that I know of have let bees die of starvation, not on purpose. We don't mean to. Some people say, well, you shouldn't have to feed a colony of bees. They go out and get their own feed. They're not like a cow that's dependent on you in the wintertime to provide them with hay. They get their own food stored up. That's what lasts through winter. Now, sometimes we have, even during the summertime, I think one of the things we know we don't do a good job at is the dearth. We'll have flows and dearths, or nectar flows, and times where there's no nectar available. And they'll put honey in, and during the time there's no nectar, they'll eat that honey up. Hopefully they bring more in than they consume, and we have extra honey, and they have extra honey, and everything works out fine. But there's times during the summer there's no nectar flowing, and we need to feed. If we don't feed and they can't get their what they need from us feeding them, they'll get it by eating their own brood. They'll cannibalize their brood. And I think that's a lot of times why we don't have good brood patterns and all, is because we haven't fed them right or kept them healthy. But we need to think a lot more about nutrition and starvation, and not letting the hives get weak from being malnourished by not having enough to eat. We try to be proactive in beekeeping and not reactive. You have to know ahead of time. You have to be able to see when nectar's not flowing. And once you find out, sometimes when we find out that we need to feed, it's too late. We should have done it a couple weeks ago. So you got to and that comes through experience. If you're new, it comes through having a mentor, somebody that can help you. But we need to be proactive. And if we're reactive, it's just like swarm cells. If you wait till you see swarm cells to do something about swarming, it's too late. You need to do it before then. You need to know when it's going to happen and be proactive and do something before that. Get used to hefting. Hefting is just lifting up on the back of the hive. Every time you go out to the bee yard, you should be lifting up on your hives to see how heavy it is. Just get used to it. Everybody says, well, how do you know what's heavy and what's light? You get used to it by comparison, and you get used to it by doing it all the time. But if you got a good heavy hive, they've got, that's what I'm looking for going into winter, is that they've got enough honey to last through the winter time. And you know that by hefting or lifting up on the hives. You need a sure way to tell if the hive is going forwards or backwards. Those notes on the hive, it would say, I put the frames on there, first 8 frames of bees one time and 10 frames the next time, and I put another box and there's 14 frames. I know the hive's moving forward. You won't remember what you do to a hive once you get out of it. You think you will, but you won't. And we feed sugar syrup. Feeding 2 to 1 right now. It's middle of October, first frost. It was pretty cool this morning. I don't know that we got a frost though, but the first frost is due any day. So it's definitely time to feed a 2 to 1. Just means 2 parts sugar to 1 part water, and that's by weight or by volume, either one. But it's a heavy syrup, a lot heavier syrup than what the 1 to 1 we've been feeding during the summertime. 3 reason is bad queens. Beekeepers do a bad job of making sure we have good queens. I know when I was keeping bees before, one of the things I'm going to do better at is when I had a bad queen, I would nurse her, try to nurse her, make her better than she was. And keeping records, one of the things I know by the records I keep is I would nurse that queen along, and I would get her to live and feed them and do the things that made her live. But I would go, you could keep that hive and watch, because of those notes, she wouldn't make any honey. Would never get strong enough to make a honey crop during the whole year. So I wasted time and money on a queen. I'd been better off to pinch her and replace her with a new queen, a good local queen. We let our queens get too old. We let them supersede. I had 50 hives. It was too much trouble, I thought, to go in and replace the queens. I don't plan to do that again. I want to keep track of my queens. I'm going to mark them so I know how old they are. And I'm going to try to have younger queens in my hives. I pinch the bag queens and try to either raise or buy local queens to have younger queens in the hive. Poorly mated queens. A lot of times the queen gets mated anytime after after the summer solstice. I think it's not going to be as good a queen if you order her from somewhere, from down south or wherever, and it's summertime and she sits in a hot delivery truck. She's not going to be, it's going to hurt her. If she goes out in the fall and to try to get mated and there's not enough drones, she's going to be a poorly mated queen. Not adapted to Kentucky winters. Some queens are just not adapted, and people will argue with me on this, and that's fine, but my experience is local queens that's adapted to Kentucky winters, it's raised in Kentucky, that's raised as close to your house. If you can raise your own queens, a lot of people are intimidated by raising queens, but if you can raise your own queens, they're going to be a lot better than anything you can buy. The second best queen is a locally produced, somebody close to you that's raising queens, and the ones that I bought from other people. And some might say that it's commercial queen breeders, just they don't care, they just want to sell a queen. You can't tell if she's well mated or not. It's just a queen to them. Maybe they don't put as much time in it as we do. I think that might be some of it, but I think it's a big part of it is they're not from here. And then sperm viability is decreased due to shipping or some other reason. So just like I was saying, setting a delivery truck or for some reason, that sperm, a queen is unique, and that sperm in her lasts her lifetime. A queen will live, 2 to 5 years. And that's a long time to have that sperm in there. So if she gets overheated or something happens, it decreases that viability of that sperm. That's another reason for a bad queen. Another thing about being proactive is to go ahead and replace her when she's not doing as good. The bees will put up with her a lot of times longer than we should to get a honey crop. Our go in beekeeping, my go in beekeeping, I know everybody's goes are a little bit different. My go in beekeeping is to make, main go is to make honey and to make extra bees. The bees' go is to reproduce. They want to swarm. That's what they're going to do. That's what their go is. Their go is different than our goes. Number 4 reason, and it's on that list of top reasons, but it's not in their top 5. Their top 5 was unknown in weather, but it's on down 6 or 7. I don't remember which one, but condensation. You got to do something about condensation and moisture in the hive. So you got to be able to control it. Ventilation versus insulation was another controversy. And I didn't start the argument. I just gave somebody my opinion that Al Landon was one of our past presidents of Kentuckiana. And when I first started beekeeping, he was the president there, and he was telling us all, he knew about bees. He was an older guy at the time. He's passed on now. But he always told me, he said, one of the keys to beekeeping is ventilation. You've got to have a top entrance or top ventilation. Air's got to be able to flow through that hive to get that moisture out of the hive. And I've always lived by that. I've always provided ventilation. But I give that advice or that experience to somebody on the internet, and somebody jumped all over me, and no, that's not the way. It's insulation. And I can understand that, and if I look at it and set the pride aside, I can see the points. I think it is good to have insulation at the top. I think the warm air inside next to the cold air outside, only separated by that inner and outer cover, I think causes some moisture issues on the top. And that's what kills the bees. Cold doesn't kill bees. It's the moisture dripping down on them. But insulation will help that as well as ventilation. So I can see the merits of the insulation and don't want to totally rule that out. But you got to have a way to control that moisture in the hive. Cold does not kill bees. Water dripping on bees when it's cold kills bees. they've kept bees down to 65 below zero, and the bees were fine. If they were healthy and well fed and didn't have water dripping on them, they were fine to 65 below zero. I actually want, and this is, I know some people won't agree with this either, but to me, cold winters are better than warm winters. If we have a warm winter, the bees stay active and they eat more food. If it's cold, they are less active and don't consume as much food. So I don't like having warm winters as far as the bees goes. I'd rather be cold and stay cold. And then you got to protect it from drafts. Most of my yards, apiaries have trees on the west side of the hive, so the west wind can't come and get up through screen bottoms. I keep screen bottoms all winter. I don't use a board underneath of them. I just use the open screen all winter long, and they do fine. But you can't have drafts. You can't have them sitting up on the top of a hill with nothing to keep that wind from blowing up under that screen bottom board. One of the points that the lady with the insulation made is that moisture provides water for the hive during the wintertime. So that condensation will provide them water. They have to have water all summer as well as nectar. And that provides her point. One of her points was that they needed that water you want the water to drip down, but not from the top. So in her mind, the condensation would drip down the sides and they would consume it. I believe that to a certain extent. I know some of the hive domes, they make a clear hive dome you can put on top of your hive and I think it's a deep box to use to cover it up, but the moisture will run down the dome instead of dripping on top of the cluster. But beekeepers can see that moisture, and you pull the top off and the bees will come up and clean that moisture up and drink that water. So and then number 5 reason is just the viruses, diseases, and fungal pathogens that comes along with, mainly with mites. But you got to try to make sure that your bees don't have any issues. EFB is European foul brood. It's fairly common, not as common, I don't think, as it used to be. Nosema is something you got to watch for. There's, I think, Nosema apis and Nosema ceranae. You got to watch for that. It's dysentery or bee diarrhea. Chalk brood is fairly common. You'll see chalk brood mummies out on your landing boards. You got to look at that. AFB is American foul brood. The only treatment for that is burning the hive. You do not want that. I think we may have had a couple cases in Kentucky, but it's not been much. I think I heard West Virginia had several cases of it, but you can't get rid of those spores. Last for like 70 years from American foul brood, and the only treatment is to burn that hive. You don't want that spreading to all your hives or to anybody else's hives. And then wax moths and hive beetles are symptoms and not the cause. They're, not everybody, but some people say, well, my bees were killed by hive beetles or wax moths took over my hive. Well, they took it over because they were weak from something else. They're a result of a weak hive or a hive with extra room. The hive beetles, if you have extra room in the hive where the bees can't defend it all, then the hive beetles will get on those frames and then the bees have a hard time with it. If you got a good full hive that's full of bees, they usually take care of the hive beetle problem. You don't have as much hive beetle problems in those hives as the ones with extra room. So be careful about the extra room. And then just to sum it up, you need to treat your hives. I'm always going to be a proponent of treating your hives. Yes, you can treat different ways, but I went down that road and lost all my hives. So I will always be a proponent of treating. If I've got a dog that's got problems, I'm going to give that dog some medicine to take care of it. My kids, I'm going to give them medicine. If I get sick, I'm going to take some medicine. I'm going to do something about it. I'm not going to let something suffer and die from something that's eating them from the inside out. You need to feed them at certain times. You might need to feed them during the summertime. You might need to feed them after the flow. But you are going to need to feed them at times as needed. The queens that I've got are swarm queens. I call them all in swarm traps. And some of them are super, super good, and some of them are a little slower. So you got to feed the ones and feed as needed. Ventilate or insulate, take your pick. I like to ventilate. I'll probably put some insulation on too this year, maybe. I've got some insulated covers with a top entrance, and I'll probably put those on the hive. Make sure you have a great queen. I've made up my mind that if I might lose some hives, but I'm not going to lose them because of mites. I'm not going to lose them because of starvation or nutrition. And I'm working toward the great queen part. I didn't have enough hives this year to raise queens, but that's on the agenda. Your queens that you can raise, if you can raise queens, are going to be your best queens, and they're going to be from your best hives. You work all year long. Every year, we spend a lot of time and effort on these bees, and they do call themselves out to an extent. I had to combine. Some queens didn't work out. So I'm getting to a point that I know my best queens. If I can raise queens off my best queens, I'm perpetuating all that work that I've done. If I just go to somebody in Georgia and order queens, I'm perpetuating whatever work they've done. And they might not have done any. They might just want to sell. I don't know. I know by the reputation, and other people have had them and they done good. But your best queen's always going to be some that you can raise. So I know it's going to cost me some, just from past experience. I've raised queens in the past, and you have to take some of your production hives and not have production out of those hives because you're going to use them for the extra bees it takes to raise queens. But you're going to be a lot better off in the long run by having your own queens that you know are good and that perpetuates your genetics and what you've got going in your yard, not somebody else's yard. And just ensure that there are no other diseases. Deformed wing virus is another something you can see pretty easy. I've had hives that's had that before, and you can see their wings are just like they're chewed up or just terrible. But those hives don't last very long. You've got to be able to see that kind of stuff and get it taken care of as soon as possible. So I'll go ahead and stop there. I'll probably be doing some other presentations and talking some more about some other stuff, and that way we'll have it on YouTube, where if somebody misses it in person, they can be able to come on here and look at it. I appreciate you watching, and I'll see you on the next video.